This is tonight's update on the Riley. I'll probably make a lot more shorter, quicker updates while I'm building this frame because it's a new thing for me. I'm not quite sure exactly how to go about it the best way, so I'm learning as I go. But it's probably quite interesting to see what I'm trying to do and how I'm doing it. I've come back to the side, or the top rails, the rails that run on top of the chassis. Thanks for the suggestions that people gave me for what sort of material to use between the wood and the actual chassis rail. There's quite a few different things, different suggestions, usually some sort of rubbery type compound. I can't remember any of the names of them off the top of my head, but one comment I've had or talking to people is whether or not you put a strip under the whole thing or just where you bolt it down. So effectively you have little spaces, rubber spaces more or less, just where the bolts go, and leave gaps for the rest of the place. So the rubber stops the body squeaking against the chassis, because on a car like this everything moves. It's very, very flexible. Effectively the chassis aren't built to be stiff. The suspension is very stiff and the chassis moves around. It's just how they did it back in the day. So the chassis will move underneath the body. The body will have some flex as well. That's one of the reasons you use ash, is because it's a little bit springy. But I think that kind of makes sense, that you would have little pads effectively where it bolts down. So it bolts down tight, but it leaves a little air gap between the timber and the frame so that you don't get water in there and it doesn't rot out. There's different ways of doing it. I don't know what I'll do yet. I'll still figure it out later on. But I started making or shaping the rails. The blocks I glued on at the back did work fine. You can sort of see a little piece glued on there. I glued on way more than I thought I needed, just so I knew that when I cut it down, I wasn't going to run out. And I realized I didn't need my side profile, the one I actually made out of a piece of timber. I didn't need that, because what I discovered I could do is, because of the way these chassis rails work, this is below the level of the top of the chassis. Same with the front one, there's a step there. So I was actually able to just sit the timber where I wanted it, and I sort of shimmed it up with parallels, actually, machining parallels. And then I was just able to draw, using the chassis rail itself, draw a line on the timber. And that gave me a line to cut to. What I did first though, and this is something I've done before with metalworking, and it's always worked pretty well for me, is if I've traced a line of something that's not straight, it's following some sort of curve, and then I want to cut the line and make it fatter, I use masking tape to extend the line, if that makes sense. So masking tape comes in fixed widths. So what you can do, this is 6mm for example, close enough to 1/4 of an inch. You stick a strip of tape along that edge, following the edge, and then that gives you another line offset from it. And you can also do fractions of the width. It's easy enough to just line up the tape by eye and put a second layer on, say halfway along, and that would give you a 9mm gap. And then what I was able to do is trace the line, and then I cut it out on the bandsaw, basically, vertically, like this. I was able to put it through. That worked fine. And then using my sanding machine, after I cut it, I just cleaned it up. I didn't adjust the shape, but I was able to then lay that down on the chassis and just more or less by eye figure out where I needed to remove a little bit of material. We're talking sort of millimeters here now, and I was able to use this. I put a new belt on it and sand away the material where it was sitting a little bit high, until I basically got the timber to follow the shape of the chassis rails quite nicely. There's not much gap there. And of course, if I sit it up on little rubber blocks, there's going to be a gap there anyway, so it doesn't matter. The top level, or the top, is the top of the board, so that is perfectly flat. The other thing is to note is, of course, this chassis is a replica and it was effectively handmade, so it's not perfect anyway. You can sort of see it's not completely level all the way around, especially where it bends. So this, I think I've got it to within, well, probably a 1/16 of an inch, which is probably way more accurate than it actually needs to be. It'd be interesting to know how accurately the originals were built, the timber frames on those. But those should work well. They may still be a little bit fat in that direction. But again, I can use my same trick and just run a line of tape along it, or with an edge like this, you could actually use a compass and just draw a line parallel to the edge to give me what I need to finally trim it or sand it to. I had to do both halves separately because the chassis isn't 100% identical. This is the driver's side one. You can see how it does bow up a little bit there, but that is the shape of the chassis rail. I don't want to go bashing that around too much, but that's how it is, and that's how it fits nicely. The other thing is where the fold is along the edge isn't necessarily perfect. I mean, you can see there, it's a little bit wobbly, but the important thing is that the top is flat, because obviously the door sits on there and you've got the door frame and the door skin and all of that kind of thing. These are a little bit long as well, so I haven't trimmed the length exactly yet, but that'll be the next step. So that's what I've been doing tonight. There was some interesting comments on one of the other channels I watch, the name of which I cannot remember just at the moment. It's basically Dominic from the repair shop. He does all sorts of interesting things, and he's just started working on a Porsche 356. 356 or 365, whichever one. People know what I mean. Which he's going to rebuild. It's pretty rusty, so he's got a big job ahead of him. And in the comments in that, people were talking about motivation, and a lot of people suggested making a plan and planning out exactly what you're going to do so that you've got goals. But I find that doesn't work for me, especially on a project like this where I can't really plan it because I've never done it before, so I don't know how long things are going to take me. So, if you'd done 10 of them, you would know, okay, making those bottom rails will take an hour. It's actually taken me, about 2 hours tonight just to do that, get that bottom shape. It was another few hours the last night when I started doing it, and then more hours before that when I was drawing up templates. So it takes a long time, and I don't know how long it's going to take. So my approach to these kind of things is more open-ended, and I just try to do a little bit every day. And it doesn't have to be a lot. Sometimes it's just coming out and, for example, rummaging through boxes of parts that are sitting on shelves just to reorganize them and figure out what you've got. Other times it's just sitting and looking at it and staring at it and measuring things. But I find as long as I come out and do something every day, it keeps me going, I guess, keeps me motivated. And I don't put that pressure on myself to say, tonight I'm going to get those rails made, because I might not. And if you put that sort of pressure on yourself, it can be more discouraging than not doing things on the car. At least that's what I find works for me. That's how I do my projects, and that's pretty much how all of my projects have worked. I do have a pretty good idea of what I'm going to do and what order I'm going to do things. But yeah, knowing how long they're going to take, that's always pretty open. So with those done, I guess the next thing will be trimming them nicely and figuring out what width I need there. Obviously, it's not a very wide car, so you don't want to lose a lot of width. And if this is sitting flush with the outside of the chassis rail, I've got a good, it's a bit hard to tell from here, but an 1/8 of an inch or 1/4 of an inch narrower I need to make these. But that'll be easy on the bandsaw, especially because this top surface is flat, so that'll just sit flat on the table and it's easy to saw that. I'm getting the hang of doing the band sawing as well. Obviously, the ash behaves differently to MDF, which is the only thing I've cut on it before. But I just take it slowly and it works fine. It cuts really well. So that's where I'm up to with the frame tonight. The other thing, I know I've ranted about this before, but about the costs of things and why projects like this are so expensive, especially somewhere like New Zealand where you have to order a lot of parts in. So this is a very simple thing I want to do. These are 5/16 studs that are holding the exhaust manifold on. And I want to get some 5/16 brass nuts. Obviously 5/16 BSF brass nuts. You'd think that would be simple. So I went to the place most people look when in New Zealand. The first place you tend to look is on Trade Me, which is our local auction site. It's very similar to eBay. Because Trade Me was here, eBay never really got a foot in the door in New Zealand, so we don't have it. So if you use eBay, you're getting stuff from overseas. There are nuts available. They're the Champion brand ones, and they're really expensive. So a pack of 25 was 75 New Zealand dollars. They had one for 27 New Zealand dollars, which is just insane. This place, this bolt holder place, I thought they had them for $5 each, but they're Whitworth, not or BSW, not BSF, so that was no good. I found another place online where you could buy 6 of them for 48 New Zealand dollars, or 25 of them for $97. This is the same brand as here. I had a look on eBay. I could get them from the UK, £18 for 8, plus £11 postage. The exchange rate at the moment is, I think it was about 2 to 1. So it's kind of double that. I think I've got a price somewhere further down. I found another one on eBay, which you could get 25 of them for £25 and £11 postage, but that was from Australia. So that actually worked out. If you buy them from eBay in British pounds and they're shipped from Australia, it's cheaper. This is for the same thing as these ones. It was $4 cheaper than getting them locally, which is just mental. I don't understand quite how this works. I looked on their actual website and I could order direct from there, and with postage it would be 55 New Zealand dollars. So that's actually that's not too bad. That's, you know, for 25 of them for 55 New Zealand dollars, but I only need 3, which is the problem. I did try Holden UK, who I've bought parts off before. They're actually pretty good. They've got all sorts of things. So they had 10 of them for £8, which is reasonable. And if I was buying from them, I'd probably be ordering a few other things as well. But they don't actually have them at the moment. They're on back order. I did find a place in the UK that sold Land Rover parts, and they said they had them for £1 each, but the postage was going to be £54 for 3 of them. I don't understand that. You know, it's like they just don't want to ship stuff, so they just have a minimum order, a minimum price for the postage, and it's just insane. Nobody will ever do that. I found a place in America that's very similar. They had 3 of them was $6 US, and then $56 US was the cheapest shipping option to New Zealand. And I found another place in New Zealand that said they had them. They didn't have a price on the website. I contacted them and they said, oh, actually we don't have those in stock and we haven't had them for over 5 years. So this is the difficulty of trying to get 3 5/16 BSF nuts. It's just insane. I could make some, and that's actually what I'm going to end up doing. But you can't get or I haven't yet found anywhere that sells brass rod in BSF hex sizes. I did email one place that sells brass rod, and they do sell hex bar, but the guy just didn't understand what I was talking about. So I was trying to explain that, you know, BSF, BSW, the size isn't the size across the flats like it is with AF, for example. And so he kept saying to me, wait, so you want 5/16 AF, or, you know, And it just got too difficult to explain, and they don't have it anyway. So effectively what I'm going to have to do to make 3 of these nuts is order some brass round bar and then machine them up myself on the lathe and the mill. And that's actually going to be the cheapest way to do it. And the really silly thing is, it may actually be cheaper for me to buy short pieces of brass bar from China than getting it locally. I'm still talking to some people locally about how much it costs to get it and get it shipped. But you can go on AliExpress and get, 200mm lengths or whatever, and that might be the quickest, easiest, cheapest way to do it, which is just not good. And that's just the difficulty of trying to build something like this, where it's not common, so they don't have parts. Nobody's going to stock parts in New Zealand because they'll never sell them. And then there are other places online, New Zealand, I can't remember the name of the place. They have a few little bits and pieces of BSF and BSW, but the prices on them are so insane, probably because they never sell any. So their logic seems to be, well, we have to put the price up because we don't sell very many, but then of course the price is so high they'll never sell them. We're talking $20 New Zealand for a 1/4-inch bolt sort of stuff. So yeah, that's just one of the difficulties with projects like this. I'll have to try some of the car clubs and things. They may have stock, or locally there may be bits and pieces. So yeah, it makes it interesting. And this is one of the reasons for, when I decided on a bike project, I didn't want something where I have to buy little tiny bits and pieces like that from overseas. It's just getting too difficult and too expensive. But the other thing is, of course, I think I've mentioned this before, if I'm building this properly, I have to use the right fasteners. You don't want to use metric, for example, or UNF, UNC, because that's not correct. And I want it, details like that correct. Obviously my radiator isn't perfect, it's not a real one, but it is correct. The shape's correct, the size is correct, the function of it's correct. So it's good to do the same with the hardware. Also because then you only need one set of spanners. If everything on this is Whitworth, you need Whitworth spanners to work on it. You don't need a strange collection of different spanner sizes. So it'd be interesting to know, people in the UK, if you're making your own Whitworth hardware, are you actually able to buy Whitworth sized bar stock? I don't understand how that works. Or do people just make it themselves, mill down bits of round bar to get the right hex sizes? Or is it something you can actually buy? Be interesting to know. So I think that's going to be it for tonight. I've just noticed that it's a bit hard to tell, but this may have a little bit of a twist on it. So the other thing I need to do is make sure these are actually flat, or parallel to the ground in that direction, I suppose. So I'm going to check that now. It's easy enough to fix it on the linisher if I need to, but I think that's starting to look pretty good.